Gather up your t-shirts because we're going to make a quick and easy t-shirt quilt. You can use up to 24 t-shirts, so the front side of 24 t-shirts, or if you have fewer, you can use the front side with the design and use a plain back side on your quilt, whatever you desire. We're going to use 24 t-shirts today. So to start out, we're going to press our design. Your kits will come with a pressing cloth. This is a see-through pressing cloth, and you want to press your t-shirts nice and flat. And what this cloth does, it actually protects the design so that the iron doesn't burn it. We'll also use this cloth later when we put the interfacing on, but now our t-shirts are all nice and pressed, and we're going to do that to all 24 units. Now we're going to take our t-shirt block template and put it over the top of our design on our t-shirt. I have this neckline to deal with up here, so I'm going to put it about as high up as I think I can go, and then I want to center the X in my design. So I can follow along this line right here, and I can get my t-shirt block centered fairly well like this. I'm going to use 14.5-inch blocks on the quilt today, so I will make a mark all the way around the edge to show the block I want to cut. But I want you to see these other guides in here. If you want to do a smaller block, you can cut at 11.5-inch, and you would simply mark here and here, again down the side, and here, and then connect those lines and cut it out. But I'm going to do the big size, so I'm going to mark all the way around the edge like this, and then we simply need to cut that out. You can use a scissors or a rotary cutter to do that. So when I lift this up, you're going to be able to see that I've got my block outlined. Here's an example of a t-shirt where we made the block with quilting cottons on all four sides. And for this one, we used one of the smaller template sizes, and we added enough fabric on here until the block reached 14.5 inches. It's really a pretty look to do that. Here's another example of something very similar where we've added fabric all around the edges. And here's yet another idea where we use the ruler to cut the block a little bit more vertical, and then we added fabric to make it a 14.5-inch block. So choose whatever you like to do, and when you're done, we're going to cut out all our blocks and add our interfacing. If you have a rotary cutter and ruler and cutting mat, you simply want to put the ruler on the line that you just drew, and we're just going to make a cut like this. If you have a scissors, that's easy to use. You can simply take your scissors and cut your t-shirt block. We cut out our 14.5-inch block, so now I'm going to need to have 24 of these total. If you don't have enough t-shirts, you can also substitute a 14.5-inch piece of fabric like this for one of your blocks. Or if you're a quilter, you can even make a quilt block and use that as the front or back of one of your blocks. So our next step now is to stabilize the blocks. So what we're going to do is turn the block over like this so the back side is facing up, and we're working on a pressing surface like you see here. And we're going to grab the pre-cut woven fusible interfacing, and I have a piece of that right here. The bumpy side or the glue side is what faces the back of the t-shirt block, and you're just going to line that up like this. If you're using all smaller sizes of t-shirt blocks, you can cut that interfacing down. And then you're going to grab that press cloth again that we used initially. You're going to lay that over the top and spritz it with a little bit of water just to get it damp. And then we're going to press on this using about a wool setting and around 10 seconds in each area. And what that's going to do is it's going to adhere that fusible interfacing to the back of the t-shirt. Now the interfacing is woven as well, so once it adheres, it's going to make this t-shirt block almost like a cotton, like a quilting cotton block. Because of the weave in the interfacing, it's going to have a warp and a weft, just like fabric does. So it will stabilize the block left to right. It will stabilize the block up and down. So again, about 10 seconds in every area. A good tip is that the press cloth is dry. That's how you know when you are likely done. So let me take the press cloth away, and you can see that our interfacing is now stuck to our t-shirt block. So we have one unit, and it's nice and stable both directions. So we're going to make 24 of these with the stabilizer on the back. If you're using a quilting cotton like this, you don't actually have to stabilize it because it's already pretty stable. Same as if you're using something like this. But if it's a t-shirt block, we need to have stabilizer on the back. All our blocks are now stabilized, as you can see. And so now we have to decide what order we want to put them in. So we want to lay out our 12 front blocks, but we also want to lay out the back blocks. So I decided to put this block on the back of this block on my quilt. So what we're going to do for that is take the 12 pre-cut batting pieces, and we're going to sandwich this batting between each front and back square of our t-shirt quilt. So I lay the wrong side up, put the batting over the top like this, and then I get my front square, which is going to be this Hawaii block, and I layer that on here. So now I've got all 3 layers put together. My 2 stabilized t-shirts with the batting in the center. The next thing we're going to have to do is secure those 3 layers, and that's where the quilting comes in. You can stitch any fancy lines along here if you like, or what we might suggest is that you simply stitch either vertical lines or horizontal lines, because it really looks nice and it's easy to do and it doesn't really interrupt the design. You can use any size painter's tape or masking tape. It works really well to just tear off a piece of the tape like this and just put it right on the edge of your block, stitch along there, and then pull it up, line it back up with the stitching line, and continue on. And again, we did that with this block here, and I thought that looked quite nice. So there you've got it stitched on both sides, and maybe you want to do the next block horizontally, however you want to lay it out, just so that those 3 layers are secured. Our blocks are all quilted, vertical on this one, horizontal on this one. So we're all set to start joining them. So I'm going to put this block next to this block in my layout and take my sash and a dash, and you're going to cut off a 16-inch piece of this. I've got that done here. And what we're going to simply do is open the sash and a dash like this, and we're going to nest that quilt block right in here. So center it top to bottom in our sash and a dash, and then nest it right in here. We're going to be sewing on this outer line, so let's pin this in place. Now let's go to the sewing machine. Now we're going to stitch right along this edge, very, very close to our quilt block. And you're just going to want to back tack and then we'll back tack again, and we've got one quilt block attached. You can see our stitching close to the edge here, all the way down, and let's turn it over and look at the back side. You can see our stitching is also very close to the edge right here. Now we're going to flip it over back to the front, and we're going to attach our second block. So now we're going to open up the left side of sash and a dash, nest that block in there, and here's where you want to try to line up the bottom of the quilt block we just sewed with this one so that they're about at the same level. We're going to pin this in place and sew right along this edge. let's go to the machine. As you start joining your blocks, you're going to have some excess to the side. So just roll it up like that so it fits right underneath your sewing machine here. And then I'm going to line up my needle on the edge of the sash in a dash. And we're going to go ahead and sew this side. Double check that our nesting is good there. And now we've joined our two blocks together. Our two blocks are joined, and you can see I trimmed off the excess sash and a dash from the top and bottom. Now I'm going to attach my next block, so I'll have a row of 3, so that is going to be this green block here. And you're going to notice that my sewing isn't perfect here. It's also not perfect up here, but that's okay because, as you know, it's going to be nested right inside that sash and a dash. So if you're a beginner, it's still going to look perfect. So don't worry about your sewing. So I'm going to nest my block in sash and a dash like this. And again, we're going to sew all along the edge. And then I'll nest the other side in sash and a dash. And again, I'm going to try my hardest to line up the tops and to line up the bottom so that it comes out perfectly. We're going to sew on the outside edge of sash and a dash. Our third block is now joined, and you can see I trimmed any excess sash and a dash. So now I've got a complete row done. The next thing we're going to do is join rows. I'm going to take my second row and bring it down here like this, and you're going to take your sash and a dash and you're going to cut a 48-inch piece. We're going to do the same thing joining row to row as we did block to block, and we're essentially going to tuck our blocks, our rows, into the sash and a dash and line everything up. So for example, on this particular one, you just want to make sure that your blocks line up and that the vertical sash and a dash is also lined up. And then we'll sew all the way across this row after we get it all tucked in, and then we'll sew all the way across here on the outer edge when everything is tucked in, and then our two rows will be joined. Our last step is the binding, and your kit will come with 6 yards of pre-made binding. It works similar to sash and a dash in that you're just going to nest the edge of your quilt right inside the binding. And I would definitely clip or pin this so that it stays in place. And when you get to about 2 inches away from the corner, we're going to make a stop. So let's estimate 1-2 inches from the corner. What I like to do is put a second pin near there so that I can kind of remember, oh, I've got to stop here, something different is happening. So now what you're going to do is you are going to take your binding and you're going to fold it under. You're going to fold the whole binding piece under like this, okay? And what you're going to do is take your finger and you're going to make finger press that angle in there. And then what you're going to do is open it up, and keeping that same pivot point here, you are going to bring this angle that you finger pressed in right down to the edge of the binding, and that forms that beautiful miter right here. It kind of forms an arrow right here as well, okay? So I'm going to pin that in place. If you're using clips, that's fine too. I might put a couple pins in here, but I wanted you to be able to see the miter. Now I'm going to turn it over to the back side, and then you can just see how nicely that folds over on the back side. And it creates that miter here as well, that angled miter. Now look at it, covers up all my little problem areas in here too. So it kind of does double duty for us there. Now what you're going to want to do is take that pin out, and now that you've got your miter formed, you're going to pin through all layers, and as we start to sew this, then we know this is where we're going to pivot. And then I would continue on to do the rest of the side like this, pinning my binding in place, and continuing on till you get to the next corner. When you get to the next corner, stop about 2 inches away from the corner and repeat. Now we're ready to sew our binding on, and you can use a straight stitch or zigzag. I'm going to use a zigzag stitch today because that gives a little stretch to that, and that's nice when you have a t-shirt quilt to have that little stretchier finish. So we'll get it going, and remember, if you're using a zigzag or a straight stitch, it's always safe to take your pins out as you stitch. As I approach this corner, I'm going to be mindful that I want to pivot right at that angle. There we go. Keep our presser foot, turn the corner, put my presser foot back down, and we continue on. We're on the home stretch with our binding, so we're just going to sew a little bit more. I want to stop about 4 inches away from this beginning point, so let me just continue on until I get kind of in the middle of our sashing here. Okay. Now what we're going to do is find the beginning point and cut about 3.5 inches of binding extra like this. So we'll just snip that off. And then we're going to open this up, and we're going to fold this raw edge under like this, and you can press that or just finger press it. Fold it over. So now we've got a finished edge here. And what we're going to do is layer that finished edge right over the top of our binding, and we're just going to encase that all right in. So if you want to pin it, that's fine too, but it's a little bit easier to kind of just manipulate it with your fingers. Okay, I'm making sure that this folded edge stays under and that I'm right on top of the binding.